Hey guys, welcome. This is a very, very good game of Rebels where I actually looked like I was playing Cybernetics and transitioned to the Rebels. Now, for those of you that have watched my auto chess videos before, you know that I like to do this kind of gameplay where I speed it up to 2 times and I talk over what I was doing and where I decided to go and kind of like all my thought processes and that kind of stuff. So what you can see here is in the early game I picked up a 2-star Fiora and I have a pair of Leonas. Now this is usually a pretty good indicator that Cybernetics would be the way to go, because if I get 2-star Cybernetics just coming out of round 2-1, I'm pretty certain that Cybernetics is going to be the way to go. However, one of the key defining factors of Cybernetics in the early game is getting Lucian, because Fiora and Leona are not so good by themselves. You really need Lucian to make sure that you get a really good mid-game carry for Cybernetics, otherwise you're going to start to struggle. So you can see, although I've picked up a load of Cybernetics here, I haven't really got the main cybernetic carry for the early game, which is Lucian, which is why I haven't actually been able to commit fully to cybernetics, even though you can see based on my bench, I am now splitting my bench between Rebels and cybernetics. I pick up a pair of Ziggs and a Yasuo and I say, okay, if I don't find this Lucian soon, I am just going to go down a Rebel pathway. Now the reason I'm going down a Rebel pathway is if you have a look at my items don't really favor cybernetics. I have an Ionic Spark, I have a Rabadon's Death Cap, I have a Tear. Like, these are not particularly good cybernetics items. Maybe Hand of Justice for Lucian if I get a Brawler's Glove with the Tear, but these are not, I mean, you looking at those items, you're looking at the bigger items that I can make with them, and I'm thinking Rabadons, I'm thinking Seraphs eventually, and then I'm thinking in my head, these are insane Aurelion Sol items. Like, I could really do damage with Aurelion Sol if I go Rebels this game. So that's why I decided to keep Rebels on my bench in this scenario. Now, have a guess what I'm gonna go for? If you've selected Tier, you are correct. I went for the Tier for the very simple fact that I wanted to get that Seraphs online for my potential Aurelion Sol later on. At this point, it's quite clear that I haven't found a Lucian by 2-4. My items don't really stack up very well for cybernetics. I'm going to start to try and force Rebels at this point. That's why I'm not actually buying the Vi, or rather I think you'll see me sell the Vi in a moment, because to be honest with you, they're just not particularly good items for cybernetics, and I give one of those items each to my cybernetics because I do have that cybernetic bonus engaged, and I do want to make sure that I'm getting the most out of it in the early game, at least to protect my HP total as much as physically possible. So I actually give all of them an individual item, but I don't actually combine anything. Again, for that reason that I don't really want to commit to going cybernetics when I don't really have the items for it. So you can see here I sell off pretty much everything, and I'm only keeping the Rebels on my bench. The reason I sell off everything is to get to 20 gold. 20 gold is obviously another gold threshold. When we talk about gold thresholds, we're talking about 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 gold. The reason they are gold thresholds is because every 10 gold you own, you get 1 extra gold interest at the end of the round. So by getting to 20 gold, I'm going to get myself an extra gold than I was when I had 17 or 18 before that. So just hitting 20 gold gives me that extra threshold. Also, I like to keep a bit of a clear bench. I'm one of those people that gets a bit anal about my bench and what it looks like. And I'm not going to buy either of the Karmas here. Neither am I going to buy anything else because I am at 30 gold. The only way I'd buy one of these units or a pair of Karmas or a pair of Zoes would be if I found gold on this round, of which I do, which is enough for me to buy 1 Karma. Karma is actually a pretty good unit. She's very, very good at supporting a mid-game carry, and you can see I found a Morellonomicon here as well. So at this stage in the game, I've now got a Morellonomicon, a Rabadons, and a Seraphs. They are basically, except for demolition, except for the demolitionist charge, they are essentially perfect Aurelion Sol items, because obviously the ultimate Aurelion Sol is you give him the demolitionist charge and then you buy a Gangplank, and then Aurelion Sol and Gangplank are just stunning the entire board. That's the best form of rebel composition that you can get. Sub to that, I would say Rabadon, Seraphs, and Morellonomicon are pretty close to perfect items. Jeweled Gauntlet maybe is also up there, but I'm feeling like I've got pretty gosh darn perfect items in this scenario. So I actually find the Yasuo, and I end up saying, okay, let's actually engage Rebels now, and let's stack my Ziggs with these items. Ziggs is going to do an insane amount of work with these items. He's essentially going to one-shot most units on the field, and you're going to see it here. just watch him like one bomb some of these units. I'm going up against protectors, which can be a bit iffy, and obviously my Zig's going down pretty low here, but we essentially ended up winning with just Ziggs bombing everyone to death. He is absolutely monstrous with these items. Now, the unfortunate thing about this is if I ever did get a Demolitionist charge or a Gangplank, I would have to sell the Ziggs and give these items to the Aurelion Sol. These items could also very easily go into Gangplank, by the way. These are pretty good Gangplank items if you wanted to do that. But it's really, I think it really comes down to who you think you're going to 2-star first. And in my case, playing a Rebel composition, you know, 2-starring the Aurelion Sol makes him much more tanky. I end up going down to a good Cybernetic player here. He had a lot of good items. But it is what it is. We actually are now at 50 gold. We are looking to just level up as quickly as possible. Now, when I'm playing a Rebels build, obviously the entire Rebel build hinges on Aurelion Sol. So the game plan when you're playing Rebels is get to 50 gold, and all of that excess gold goes directly into experience. You want to rush 8, essentially, and pick up whatever you can along the way. And in my scenario, I've obviously now got 6 Rebels. I'm going to surround the Ziggs, because he is essentially my carry at this point in time, and I'm going to give Zephyr to my Leona. That Zephyr is another really good S-tier item, in my opinion, and I think it's just really good throughout the entire game. Like, just taking out a unit for 7 seconds almost is just absolutely broken. It's because essentially if you get it on a good unit, like a carry or a big front line, you can just circumvent them completely. And you're now starting to see my composition do some serious work, because we have the Jinx as well. Jinx is actually a good unit by herself. 1 second, I'm just going to quickly go and get my baby, as he started crying midway through the video, and we will continue in just a moment. Alright, I'm back, and baby is sufficiently looked after with his mother. Right, so we're back in here. We've got 5 Rebels on the field. We're looking for our 6th Rebel. Now, there are a couple of ways to play this. We could just throw in the 6th Rebel, which in our case, I think is Master Yi I'm still looking for. So we could just throw Master Yi in over the Leona, then give the Zephyr over to the Malphite. That would give us the 6 Rebels, and I think actually that's something that, now that I've got Master Yi, I'll consider doing. However, I'm not going to do it on this neutral round, because actually we can just go Leona with Master Yi at level 7, which I'm going to get next round. Now, as I said, the primary goal for me over the next few rounds is essentially trying to force my way to level 8 as quickly as possible. Getting a Nico's help, by the way, is actually insane. Especially because I'm playing around getting a 2-star Aurelion Sol, so that removes the need for me to get 1 Aurelion Sol. I'm going to give the Giant Spell over to the Jinx, because it can make a couple of good items. It can make, like, Trap Claw, for instance, which is a pretty solid item on Jinx. And really, she's the only other person that I'm going to give too many items over to in this scenario. So I give the Giant Spell over to Jinx just to make her a little bit more durable, which is obviously important when you're playing Rebels, because she is a kind of a secondary carry, when you, especially next to the Aurelion Sol. But obviously the Ziggs is kind of being outclassed a little bit now. Ziggs is kind of getting to the point where his single target damage is not going to do the job, but I'm at 51 HP. I'm halfway to level 8 at round 4-2. We're just going to continue to play greedy. So what we're doing is it's called slow leveling, but it's basically just all of your experience, or sort of all of your gold that you get after 50 gold is going directly into getting level 8. And that level 8 is then going to give you the opportunity to get Aurelion Sol. You know, at level 8, obviously you can find him at level 7, but the chance is so low compared to just being level 8, which is why we are searching for level 8 to get Aurelion Sol on the board, to make sure that our composition comes online. Positioning wise, I'm positioning the kind of the very standard way that Rebels position. Stick Jinx over in the right hand corner. If Jinx was my main carry, she would kind of go in the middle, but your main carry goes in the middle of all your Rebels. That means they have the most other Rebels adjacent to them, which means that they are most likely to, sorry, they take the least damage because of the shielding. And then Jinx goes over on the right-hand side because she's a vulnerable target, and you want her to be protected by the edge of the board, which is why she goes on the right-hand side. This can be reflected on the left-hand side as well. But basically, the Rebels positioning is really easy to get your head around, because essentially all you do is you stick your most important Rebel in the middle, and then you surround it with the other Rebels. Sona usually goes at the back. Jinx usually goes on the right-hand side or the left-hand side, closest to the edge of the wall. And then Yasuo, Malphite, and Yasuo, Malphite, and Master Yi all kind of like surround the front lines, depending on which ones are leveled up to where and where you want them to go, etc. But Malphite generally wants to head towards the middle. He's a damage soak. Master Yi kind of on the outside, and then Yasuo joins the fight afterwards. But you can see we're actually now in a pretty strong position because we are level 8, and this is the point in the game where we're going to start doing a bit of rolling to look for level ups. We're going to start looking pretty heavily for Aurelion Sol. If we can find Aurelion Sol, it puts us in a really strong position overall. What would I add, alongside Aurelion Sol at level 8? Well, I'd add a Kale, probably. So, or at least another Blademaster, which would benefit my Master Yi and my Yasuo. And I'd also add a Misfortune, because that's going to benefit my Jinx and give me the 2 Blaster, which is important too. Getting 2 Blasters is very important, especially with Jinx, and especially if I give her any kind of itemization. It's just nice to have that Blaster bonus on the field alongside the Jinx too. You can see here we end up winning by skin versus a guy who I like hyper-rolled Chrono snipers, which was a crazy thing to do. But yeah, I'm essentially not in a rush to roll down. I've got 43 HP. A couple of bad rounds would definitely put me back, but you know, if I lose one more round and drop down to 20, that's probably where I'm going to think about rolling my entire sort of gold to try and find the Aurelion Sol. But for the most part, I'm still winning rounds. I'm still pretty comfortable. I have really good items, so I'm happy to just kind of run this one through. I find a Giant Slayer, which I'm just going to combine on an Annie, sell, and give to the Jinx because it's a really good Jinx item. And now, obviously, we are kind of getting some 2 stars that are also pretty important to us. We find the Aurelion Sol, we whack him on the field, and then we're just going to throw all of those items onto him. And this now puts me in a really strong position. What I'm looking for now is one more Aurelion Sol, because then I can get a 2-star. And if I get a 2-star Aurelion Sol, oh my word, we are just absolutely smurfing it. And you can see Aurelion Sol's damage is just absolutely ridiculous with these items. We're now in the late game. Interestingly enough, we have 10 minutes of gameplay left. I was definitely being put under pressure by a couple of people in this game, so it really came down to the wire in the late game. I find 2 Misfortunes, which is important because Misfortune is another unit which I could very happily stick like a Thief's Gloves on if I find them. And you can see here I find a Gangplank too, which is actually fantastic. In fact, Gangplank is just a good individual unit. Now, because I don't have the Demolitionist bonus online, he's not quite as strong. One of the things that I should have done in this scenario was probably sub out someone like the Malphite, or maybe sub out someone like the Yasuo and bring the Ziggs back in for the Demolitionist bonus. But obviously we didn't get the chance to do that. But actually just having a Gangplank on the field, if you can find another Morellonomicon, for instance, is always a really good thing. So just having Gangplank on the field is nice. He's a good unit. At 2-star, he's fantastic as well. But we're pretty much in the end game of our build. This is essentially the full build that we wanted. At level 9, what I'd probably add in would be Kale for both Blademaster and Valkyrie for the Misfortune. That would be the best. I think the best extra. The other one would be adding in something like a Ziggs to get the Demolitionist charge. So you can see I take the Jinx. Now, why did I take the Jinx on this, even though there was a Demolitionist's charge on sale there? Because Demolitionist charge obviously would have set off my Gangplank. Well, the reason I took the Jinx is that she had a GA and it got me level 2 Jinx. That's actually really important because Jinx, with the items that she's got, and now with Blaster, actually makes her a really viable second carry in this Rebel composition. And now I essentially have 2 carries in my Rebel composition as a whole. So that's actually just really strong. Like, Jinx was going to do a significant amount of damage in her own right compared to the Aurelion Sol. And I actually have a double-pronged threat coming from my Rebel composition at the end of the game. So that's why I decided to take the GA over any of the other items on the field. Also, the most effective person to give a Demolitionist charge to is obviously Aurelion Sol, and I kind of already filled the items for his slots. They're still fine. The items that he's got are still perfectly fine, but obviously I kind of filled them up to its full. I'm not expecting to get a 3-star Aurelion Sol, by the way. The reason I'm just picking these Aurelion Sols off the bench is because they are going to reduce the other number of legendaries in the pool, and that essentially is going to allow me to be more likely to find a 2-star Gangplank, and obviously, as you just saw there, a 2-star Misfortune, which is pretty important too. You can see we are actually struggling, or moderately struggling, versus a Mech Infiltrator player. Mech Infiltrator is a very good build. It kind of decimates my backline. Aurelion Sol just got like one-shot by the infiltrators, so I have to be a little bit careful about where I choose to position. It really depends on who I end up facing. I also am now in a situation where with this build I still have 32 HP and 4 people left in the game. So there are 4 people with very strong builds in this game so far. And actually what I'm thinking is the best course of action now is probably going to level 9 and then adding in a Kale for the Blademaster and the Valkyrie. Obviously, level 2 Gangplank would be fantastic. Gangplank isn't really doing much in this composition, but if he gets off one ultimate, that makes him pretty strong. And I'm just experimenting with some different positioning that might help me out versus some of the different compositions that we have. But for the most part, I feel pretty comfortable that we are in a good spot. It really just depends on kind of the fights that we end up having. And you see here that we did get flattened by an Echo. Echo is a very strong unit in his own right as well. But we are still doing completely fine. At this point, my 3-star goals are definitely Malphite, and I said to myself, I'm pretty certain that I'm just not going to find the 3-star Yasuo and the 3-star Sona, so let's just stick with the 3-star Malphite and then go to level 9, add another Rebel to the mix, which makes my Aurelion Sol a bit more durable, and then obviously we are looking primarily for a Kale or a Ziggs. I think Kale would kind of just add another facet to my composition. So the other part of the composition is obviously the Misfortune right now. She's super strong, and you can see me just searching for a Kale because Kale would be a really good addition alongside a 3-star Malphite. If I hit the 3-star Malphite, I get a really beefy frontliner with a Zephyr, which is nice. And then if I hit the Kale, I'm going to get the Valkyrie bonus and the Blademaster bonus, which the Blademaster bonus won't make too much difference with my Kale not actually having any items, but an extra couple of basic attacks from Yi and Yasuo could genuinely make the difference. So I actually changed my positioning up here. The reason I changed my positioning up here is to try and make my Aurelion Sol more mobile off the back line. You can see the Infiltrator guy still beat me up. And then it came to a decision for items on this round. I actually picked up the Bramble Vest because I think the Bramble Vest is going to be a really good item to throw onto my my Malphite, for instance. So I can give my Malphite the Bramble Vest. He becomes 3-star with just an insane tankiness. And I actually decide to move back over to the other side of the field. The reason I moved back over to the other side of the field, by the way, is actually just to add, just to try and keep my Jinx a bit safer. I put Yasuo now on the back line. So if the Infiltrator comes towards the back line, then he's going to get stuck with the Yasuo for a little bit, which will buy time for my Aurelion Sol and my Jinx to do their work. I also added a Soraka. The reason I added Soraka here, and actually this is something I completely forgot about looking back, added the Soraka and now instead the Lulu, specifically because the Mystic bonus might actually help me versus the Kai'Sa, for instance, and also a lot of the magic damage coming out from the Infiltrator player. I mean, the Infiltrator player has got 3-star Kai'Sa, 3-star Shaco. This is why I've grouped everybody up in the position that I have, and I've put the Malphite on the back line. The reason I did this is because I want Malphite to take the damage for the most part from my Infiltrators, at least buy me a bit of time for my Aurelion Sol and my Jinx to do the work. And you can see by changing my positioning and putting Malphite on the back line, we are now in a really strong position. And with the Lulu as well, I'm protecting my Lulu just ever so slightly, because if Lulu can get one ability off, she hexes 2 units that are close to her, which makes them useless for a good few seconds. And actually that's so important versus Infiltrators, because it's more likely than not that Lulu is going to be with Infiltrators on the back lines. So that's why it's the most important thing that I could do in this scenario. Lulu 2 as well makes her even more beefy, but that's... And actually, I get rid of the Gangplank because he's useless in this scenario, and I do add the Kale. So the Kale makes my Misfortune strong with Jeweled Gauntlet, obviously, as well. And also my Blademasters get a little bit stronger as well by just adding in the Kale also. So I just essentially think our composition is nigh on unstoppable at this point. We have just got such a strong late-game comp. And you can see here that on this round, right at the end, very little that he could do just to contend with me. It's just, at this point, my composition is just so strong, there's just no way that he can kind of find a way into the game. And that's it. That's basically my comp winning. The reason I've got the positioning like this is to protect my Jinx and Aurelion Sol. I put my Malphite on the back line specifically because he's the tankiest. I actually put my Lulu in front of the Kale because she's 2-star, so she's quite likely to get an ability off before she dies. Right there. Both the Kha'Zix and the Shaco got hexed, and the rest of my composition just completely crushed it. So that's why I put Lulu there, because I wanted her to make sure she was hexing either the Shaco or the Kai'Sa, and we end up getting the win, which is absolutely fantastic. Hope you enjoyed, and yeah, and if you want to see more of this, let me know.